one of the trends we are starting to notice in influencer generally is people bringing more of their professional life into their social life influence. And so the example, I thought this was really cool. I'm seeing it in other places too, but I was talking to my team about the beauty space. So you've got employees of Sephora and Ulta who just, even if they're just a line employee, right, working the cash register, they're seeing products come into the store. They're seeing, they're seeing trends and innovations. They hear the questions customers are asking, and they're bringing that into their TikTok videos and their YouTube videos in a way that we just hadn't seen before, that those lines are blurring. And I think that's I think it's pretty cool. And again, I'm seeing it in other verticals as well, like tech, in different kinds of ways. And so I feel like this is I feel like this is going to be an exciting trend, and it seems like one that is going to benefit you guys as well. You're perfectly positioned to take advantage of that. Welcome back to Generation Influence, a podcast celebrating the movers and shakers behind the scenes in influencer marketing and e-commerce. I'm your host, Bill Hildebolt, one of the co-founders of gen.video, one of the leading platforms in the industry with a focus on down funnel analytics. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the presence of greatness today. The OG influencer marketing podcaster, Jason Falls, is joining us on the show. Jason was here first. Jason does it best. We are mere followers on the path he has blazed, and we are honored to have him. Also, Jason has a new job. Jason, let's start there. Tell us about yourself and tell us about the new job at CIPIO.ai.
Well, thank you, Bill, and thanks for having me. I think all those accolades are just a nice way of saying I'm old, but that's okay. So yeah, CIPIO.ai, I did some content with them last summer. I was at an agency and they reached out to me because of the podcast and my sort of presence in the influencer space, and said, hey, we'd like for you to look at our platform. Maybe, let's do some content together. And I did it. And what really struck me about CIPIO is it has a different approach than most other platforms, in that we start with, let's map your community of customers and followers and fans and look for the influential voices you already know first. It has the capabilities to do what all the other software platforms do, search for a topic and all that kind of stuff. But the DNA is, influential people already. You have customers who buy from you, who have social media followers. You have social media followers and fans online that also have audiences. Let's go through them first, because they have a better chance of creating more authentic content for you, whether it's UGC or whether it's, influencer type content. And as I got to know the tool and the team, I realized that this is a software version of the book I wrote, which was, we've got to start looking at influencer marketing differently. We've got to start looking at it in terms of influence, not in terms of the people who are, spreading the word. And if you focus on it that way, it's a much more strategic approach to achieving good communications and good marketing. And so as I started to see that this platform was sort of built in adjacency to my philosophical views on influence marketing, I realized there's something special here. And so we just continued the conversation. And in November, I made the jump over into the SaaS startup world, which is a world I've not been in yet. So it's been an interesting journey.
Well, that sounds awesome. I think you're going to enjoy having the technology in-house married with the services side. That is definitely a bit where we play, obviously in complementary spaces. And so, but it's a lot of fun when you can bring some technology along for the ride. Would you say it's working already? Like, is CIPIO still in that sort of emerging phase where you're tweaking the dials and trying to figure out, all right, we know there's a pony in here, but we got to keep working the software and working the solution? Or do you feel like it's already there?
I would say yes to both. For certain things, it's already there. Like, we're a really good tool for, finding really good content, because we have image to image search and video to video search, which is different than a lot of other people too. So it's not just go in and type in a keyword and we'll search people's bios for that word. It's also, hey, this is a a static photograph, or this is a TikTok video. I like this style of creation. I want to find other creators who do this type of content. So we're really good at identifying great content and then working through the content to the creator. We're also really good at being able to, again, map your community and find the influential voices that you already know, which are going to be obviously more apt to create better, authentic content for you. But at the same time, as you know, SaaS is an evolving, it's a moving target. You're constantly tweaking, you're constantly improving, you're constantly adding more social networks, building more data, ingesting and indexing more content and creators. And so there's a constant evolution, and any SaaS company of their salt is listening to their customers and saying, oh, they keep asking for this thing. Let's move that up on the roadmap because that's going to solve that pain point for them. So I think for a lot of what we, well, certainly for what we promise that we can deliver, we're a very good solution for that right now. But we continue to grow and get better and diversify what we're offering because A, we have to, and B, the tool's not complete. It's good for this stuff. And that's what most of our clients and customers right now want. But we want it to be good for this stuff because that's what they're going to want next year, right? So we're going to keep building that way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The pain of building a software platform in the social space when not only are there new emerging platforms all the time with differing functionality, if it's a Tuesday, Instagram's going to launch some new format that you can post in, and you got to go rejigger your systems to identify that. But they change the rules, they change the APIs. The APIs aren't well documented. Oh my gosh, it is such a pain. And so the amount of resources that goes into maintaining a system like that is incredible. The thing that I so fully appreciate what you said, and that is a journey, and customers, hopefully you're excited to go on it, with you. I think actually you said that was really interesting there is the first thing you pointed out as a strength that I want to kind of highlight to the audience. Identifying really great content is not what I thought you were going to say. I thought that would be the end of the journey and the hardest thing, because when you are starting from the perspective of here's my map of people who love me, that is a logical and great place to go. But that is not typically going to have a huge overlap in my mind with people who are able to create great content. And that actually, I would think that one of the huge challenges would be you trying to sift through all of those people. And it would be a diamond in the rough where you have that overlap of they love me and they can make great content. But it sounds like you guys either really focused there or something in the technology is really good at identifying that content. Can you just explain that a little bit more? Because again, that I find that a bit unique and special.
Sure. Yeah. And I agree with you. It is unique and special. And you're right that when there is overlap, so the mapping your community is sort of, I think, the kind of the smart, thing that CIPIO did that other people didn't do to start. Let's find the people who you already know who are influential or who have influence. And let's start there. As people of influence, not necessarily influencers, because a lot of the people you're mapping there might be micro influencers. They may not even consider themselves content creators or influencers, but they're in your customer base and you like their content, right? So we'll look at the average person's, let's say, Instagram analytics the way most brands would look at a big time influencers analytics, because we get, zero in better on smaller audiences, but more relevant audiences to the brand. So when we have that, and that's how we start, that's, a unique way to approach the market. The image to image search and the video to video search is largely a byproduct of the fact that we are a company built on AI and advanced algorithms and machine learning processes to try to automate and make the discovery of the right influencers a lot better, a lot faster, a lot easier. And we know that from talking to our customers over the course of the last couple of years, that it's not always trying to find the right creator. It's trying to find the right content, the right style, something that's on brand, to use an agency term or a marketing term for people. And so that's where image to image comes in. If I have let's say I'm an outdoor accessories company and I want to find people who create content of, bearded 50-year-old men in Carhartt jackets chopping down trees with chainsaws. Well, I can pull an image like that from the internet, upload it into our system, and now all of a sudden I've got several hundred, if not several thousand people that create content that looks like that. And so now I can go and say, oh, I like this one, this one, this one, this one. And now I've got a short list of creators I can reach out to very quickly based on the content, not necessarily based on their audience. And so when you think in terms of user generated content, where the brand is actually using the content on their channels and they're not necessarily focused on the creator posting on their channels, now all of a sudden your image to image and video to video search makes a ton of sense and makes your job a lot easier. But to your point, when you have that magic overlap, when you are looking at a brand's community and you find an image or a creator that creates something that aligns with the brand and what they're looking for, holy moly. We have a fitness wellness gym client, and we did these processes with them. They've been a client now for almost a year. And we discovered in mapping their community and looking at these creators, we found a young lady who went to the gym 4 or 5 days a week. And she, created really good videos. They weren't great, but they were really good. But then we got to look into her profile a little bit and realized she's a graphic designer. So we thought, well, maybe if she has a little incentive on these videos, maybe they'll be better. Well, we reached out, partnered with her, or the brand reached out and partnered with her. And she started creating a series of videos going to the gym that were sort of motivational things. And now all of a sudden her videos are getting millions of views on Instagram Reels. And she has like 12,000 followers. Right.
Whoa.
And it's because she's like, okay, I'm going to upgrade my content because the brand where I go to the gym has reached out to me and said, hey, let's collaborate. Why don't you create some more videos that we can use and we'll maybe trade out a gym membership for it. And so when those things overlap, magic happens and it's really cool.
Yeah, that was, and that actually is a great lead into my next question is, what percentage of the time are you able to repurpose existing content, or are you repurposing existing content versus then, as you said in this example, getting them to create new content or changing the style of content that they're creating? So it's identification, but then there's the upgrade versus let's just go grab this existing stuff that's out there. I think that's a balance that I've always kind of struggled with. And for sure, both the Gen.video and in our previous incarnation, we've always leaned into, we're going to want to go create new stuff, even if we find great creators. And there are businesses out there today still thriving that sort of like, no, we just need to go, find existing content and that'll be enough. That's never been enough for us or our clients. But I'm sort of curious if you think that's changing in an AI-based world.
I definitely think it's changing, and I don't necessarily think the AI-based world has a lot to do with it. I think it's because brands want more control over the user-generated content, which is a little bit of a contradiction in terms. But what they want to do is, let's find people who create the content that we like and that we like their style. We know that they have good content creation abilities, and let's give them some guardrails. Let's collaborate with them and say, hey, based on the content you created in the past, which, oh, by the way, there's 3 or 4 posts we'd love your permission to use. So you can do that. But our focus is really more based on what we know you can do. Can we give you some guardrails and a creative brief and have you do more of it? Because that way the brand has a little bit more control and a little bit more direction in what's created, which allows the brand to save money on going out and doing a big photo shoot or video shoot to create content that they're going to use in their paid campaigns. Now they can tap into their own customers, their own fans and followers, or other creators that they find that they say, hey, we like how you create content. Can we collaborate and you create content for us? The cost of creating that content for their ad campaigns or their organic social goes way down because they're not having to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on a professional production crew.
I mean, the more I listen to you, what I feel like is this is discovery evolved in a little bit. Like this is a very different approach than, all the discovery platforms out there that say like, oh, there's 1 billion creators in the world, or there's 1 billion influencers and we've indexed them all. And you just need to go through here and find your perfect match. And maybe one filter is, oh, and they've posted about your brand in the past. This is just this turns this whole process upside down.
Yeah.
which is really interesting in a world too, where, Facebook wants everyone to use first-party data, no third-party data. And so, yeah, you're kind of saying, yeah, what do we need third-party data for? Let's start with the people that we've identified in your CRM or wherever else. That's your discovery mechanism. It's a very, very interesting approach. Now, the other thing that kind of jumps out, from an insider baseball or inside baseball perspective is I hear what the technology can do to identify all these people, but I still hear a managed services component that's reaching out, briefing, guardrails, sponsoring the woman in the gym, giving her kind of some of these prompts. Does that play into it? Or are you guys kind of saying like, okay, we've gotten you this far. Here's the woman.
Sure.
Good luck with that. Or have you guys decided, like so many others, by the way,
Yeah.
one of the great lies in influencer marketing is that, we're all just SaaS platforms, when in the reality is we're all tech-enabled agencies.
Yeah.
Look at you nodding. Anyway, what's the reality at CIPIO? Let's dish on that.
Yeah. The reality is, and this is something that anybody who's been in the SaaS world in any vertical knows this. SaaS has to almost always have a managed services component, because most of the reasons that marketers or brands come to SaaS platforms is they don't want to do it, right? They want somebody else to do it for them. And if it's not an agency, which is going to be expensive, because then the agency's got to go find the SaaS, right? And they've got to pay for that. They're going to mark it up and all that good stuff. If they can reach out to a software as a service that has a team or a managed services component that can help them or manage it for them completely, then you're going to obviously have a lot more success in selling through the software, and you're going to build deeper, stronger relationships with the brands, because you're going to be sort of incorporated into their team. And so, yeah, CIPIO absolutely offers managed services, because we know that a lot of the brands that come to us have either one person in charge of, influence marketing or user generated content, or they have, 2 or 3 people, but they have, that's the whole marketing department, and they have so many other things going on. And we work with larger brands too, but at the same time, if our software is going to be a time intensive resource spend for the brand, and it's not one they're willing to spend, then we're there to help them and say, well, you give us the instructions, we'll set it up so that all you really need to do is approve the creators that we help find for you, and approve the content if you want to approve the content before they post it live, and we'll make sure all the other stuff happens. Now, what the software does for either the brand, because the brand can do it themselves, they can just subscribe to the software and handle it internally. What we've built in the software is as much of an automated process as possible when you're talking about managing relationships with creators. If you're managing relationships, I'm sorry, all the CRM people in the world can just, be mad at me. But when you're managing relationships, you can't make it all automated, right? Yeah. There has to be some human interaction there. And when you're talking about either, pitching the idea to a creator, or, doing a creative brief and giving them some guardrails, or negotiating back and forth what the value exchange is going to be, there has to be some human interaction. So what we've done in our platform, which a lot of other platforms have, is the ability for, we've got templated communications, emails for outreach and things like that, which the brand can go in and tweak and make whatever they want. We have templated agreements that are set up to be advantageous for the brand and the creator. And they can be tweaked and written however they want, with specific deliverables or not, et cetera. So we've got all of these things templated and built into a workflow within the software that allows you to automate as much of the process as possible. Yes, there's going to have to be some, sort of manual, if you will, human interaction of, let's outreach to these creators, see if they're interested. If they are, automate the next 2 or 3 steps. Okay, now let's get their content from them. Let's review it and give them feedback. That can't be automated. So then we'll take 2 or 3 automated steps. Okay, now let's approve the content and get that live. And then we can automate the payments and all those other things too. But it's built so that the interaction that has to happen for the relationship is still there. Everything else is automated as much as it can be.
But just a couple of thoughts as you were chatting. I mean, one, I know I should never underestimate the robots, because then they'll come for me first. But we've seen some tools purporting to let AI take over that relationship management. We're kind of like, I'm not sure that's the first thing that's going to go down. I feel like that's the last, and I feel like philosophically you may be agreeing with me there. One of the trends we are starting to notice in influencer generally, is people bringing more of their professional life into their social life influence. And so the example, I thought this was really cool. I'm seeing it in other places too, but I was talking to my team about the beauty space. So you've got employees of Sephora and Ulta who, just even if they're just a line employee, right, working the cash register, they're seeing products come into the store. They're seeing trends and innovations. They hear the questions customers are asking, and they're bringing that into their TikTok videos and their YouTube videos in a way that we just hadn't seen before, that those lines are blurring. And I think it's pretty cool. And again, I'm seeing it in other verticals as well, like tech, in different kinds of ways. And so I feel like this is going to be an exciting trend, and it seems like one that is going to benefit you guys as well. You're perfectly positioned to take advantage of that. Last question I had specific about Scipio is there an ideal client, and is there a less than ideal client? And I'm particularly thinking, like, does this work better for big brands? Because again, I was thinking of that Sephora Ulta example, like, again, they've got very sophisticated influencer programs already, but this seems like a tool that could enhance that. Or is it better for smaller brands where, you really do know, you can really map almost down, like literally to the person, who those fans and followers are, and they probably feel a more personal affinity to those smaller brands, just because they do feel like it's almost one-to-one. Like where's the sweet spot, or industry wise, like
Sure.
Where are the best fits?
So I don't think that our delineation of what's better or worse for our software is based on the size of the brand. I think any brand can use it. I think where we are more advantageous, where we make more sense, is because, remember, we're sort of geared toward finding people who already know you, cultivating that user generated content, and then where applicable, asking those creators to also post on their channels. So we're, in general, from a pedigree of what we do, we're going to start with a healthy layer of micro nano influence. We're not as worried about how many followers the creator has as we are the type of content that they have. And in that scenario, I would say that we are better suited for brands that have a passion, that have a passionate following, that people would readily want to turn around and talk about, right? Now, that doesn't mean that a commodity brand it doesn't make sense for, because it certainly does make sense for. If you can find the trick is in the ask. What are you asking the creator to do, and how are you going to have a value exchange there for them to do it? So if your whole creator thing is, well, I am a generic envelope company, and I want people to, I need reviews on Amazon or whatever. Nobody's going to be passionate about generic envelopes, but if you can use our platform to identify people who are big into stationery and writing and the topics that would make sense for your brand, and you can identify them in your own community or outside of your own community and say, hey, we would love to engage you to go write a review of our envelope. We'll send you some free envelopes. You go write a review. That's what we're looking for. So it doesn't have to be a passion brand, but if your brand is one that has a higher degree or a higher tendency for people to really like you a lot or love you and turn and tell people about it, we're going to make a lot more sense for you. We were actually, our original intention when we built the platform, and I say we, I wasn't there at the time, but the original intention of building the platform was really focused on an ideal customer profile, if you will, of an e-commerce marketer. And we built the analytics and measurement tools on the back end to be able to, share unique links with every creator very easily, so that you could track every piece of traffic that came from that creator and every conversion on your website from that creator, so that you could really put an ROI value on not just your campaign or not just influencer marketing or UGC, but the actual person who created it is going to be more valuable than others, or less valuable depending on who they are. So we have a tendency to lean toward, if you have e-commerce, if you have online stores, et cetera, and we can have access to the ability to track every step of the buyer journey for you through influencers. We have a tendency to almost prefer that type of customer, but we've got plenty of brands that are like, man, we just want to cultivate the content. We don't even care about clicks and conversions. We just want the user generated content. And we're ideally suited to go find those people because, again, we're looking at the people who probably already have it and it's easier to get to them.
Well, that tracking every single piece of content, that sounds very familiar. And that's a great place of overlap with gen.video. Sounds like. I love the story. Hopefully we can figure out a partnership between the two companies. There's definitely a lot of overlap in the philosophy around the power of community, power of user generated content. That is also where we started, although today we're much more larger influencer focused. But I would love to see if we could find a way to use you guys from some advanced discovery. That's really exciting. Yeah. So congrats on the job, and congrats on all the progress and success you guys are clearly making. Let's bring this back to you personally now. You've devoted so much time to interviewing and promoting other people. So one, I'm happy to hopefully turn it around and pay that forward a little bit. But let's make you the story. What's your unique perspective or insight on influencer marketing that you bring to clients? Like, what is the Jason Falls philosophy of influencer marketing?
Well, there's two things that I really zero in on, and one is the premise of my book, which is called Winfluence, and then the premise of the podcast, which is also called Winfluence. It's really based on my philosophy. I'm thinking about it a little differently, and my thought process is, as I alluded to earlier, we've got to stop focusing on influencer marketing and start focusing on influence marketing, because that's the goal, that's the verb, right? That's what we're trying to accomplish. If we put blinders on and focus on influencer marketing, and it's just a letter, but it's an important distinction, then you have a tendency, if you're thinking about influencer marketing, to put the creator, the influencer first. And I'm not saying they're not important. I'm just saying that if you are obsessed with how many followers they have and, you know, how popular they are and all that good stuff, you're missing the point. The point is, how can you have them help you persuade their audience to take action? That's what we're trying to do. And so when you look at the goal of, I'm trying to influence an audience to take action, from a marketing perspective, from a strategic perspective, you look at the world a lot wider and say, oh, I'm trying to influence people. Well, that might be on Instagram or YouTube, but it might also be at parent-teacher conferences or through medical professionals that are going to advise their clients to do one thing or another. It could be political lobbyists that are trying to persuade, and have an effect on legislation, right? Influence is a much bigger, broader, a strategic purpose and goal and activity than influencer marketing, which kind of puts it through this Instagram or YouTube or TikToker filter, right? Those influencers or people of influence are important and should be part of your influence marketing strategy. But if you are the local franchisee of the parent-teacher store, someone with 500,000 followers on Instagram is not going to do you any good, because 0.001% of their audience is within 20 miles of your store. What you need to do is find whoever runs the local homeschool parent group. You need to find the local parent-teacher association presidents and have conversations with them. You need to talk to local pediatricians and dentists so that you can develop some way of working through them, so that when the conversation comes around, healthy brain activities for kids, well, you should go to the parent-teacher store because they have all these cool games and stuff for your kids, right? So you've got to think about, how am I ultimately influencing the audience that I want to reach to take action? And that might be through social media, but it might not be. So strategically, we have to broaden our horizons here and think about influence marketing very, very differently. The second thing that I would follow up, which is my sort of unique perspective, I think, on this whole thing, and I may not be the only person in the world who thinks this, but when you look at what I would call typical influencer marketing, the way we have determined what influencer marketing is for the last, 10, 15 years, And so if you go to a big, influencer marketing software company and you get their managed services to develop a strategy for you, what they come back to you with is, oh, we're going to reach out to 20 influencers. We're going to ask them to post 5 pieces of content each, and we're going to guarantee this many impressions. Well, I've got news for those managed services people. That's not a strategy. That's a to-do list, right? Your strategy has to be a combination of, are we using the right creators to get to the right audience? And then what's the creative concept behind it that's going to make it happen, make it explode? And too often, even big brand influence marketing strategies are, let's just sponsor posts. Let's just have this creator either review our product or stand there and smile with it or talk about how they've incorporated it into their lives. That is a very narrow view of what the possibilities are creatively, because what if instead of giving my product to 20 influencers and having each of the 20 post on their 20 channels, and then I measure my impressions and I'm done? What if we said, hey, I'm going to take 10 of these creators and I'm going to send them products. And then I'm going to have these 3 be on that one's podcast to talk about how they do hair care. And as part of that conversation, I want them to incorporate the product into the conversation. And what if I have a sports book betting thing and I sponsor some podcasts to get people to go bet on my sports book? But instead of just doing a sponsorship, I actually have each of the podcasts that I sponsor and a couple of other sports creators who talk about gambling. What if I have them talk smack about their bets on Twitter in a tagged and branded kind of conversation? You've got to come to bat with something more than, here, hold my product and smile. And that's what influencer marketing has been the last 15 years. We've got to start being way more creative so that the content for either a single influencer or multiple influencers breaks through and gets people talking and thinking about the brand. That's going to be a better way to actually influence the audience, not focus on the influencer.
Jason, you just outed yourself as an old man, because what I heard there was, one, you tied influencer, or we'll call it influence marketing, back to word of mouth, which was the big sort of mega trend, if you will, in marketing that preceded. I mean, arguably goes back to like the 50s, but everybody was trying to figure out how word of mouth marketing was going to translate online in the early aughts. And guys like Dave Balter at Buzz Agent, he was trying to walk this offline, online world. And, it was a very successful startup. There were others of us banging around against user-generated content. And you just brought it all back to that, like how it's really about people talking about your product and your brand everywhere in their day-to-day life. And so it's funny because I've never heard anybody as elegantly tie, right? I mean, I've always almost viewed it as one wave, leads to another wave, leads to another wave. But I love the way you brought it back. And then, of course, the other thing that you did was you tied it back to classic creative, because the struggle that we all had in the industry as user-generated content and word-of-mouth marketing came up, what we were telling brand managers in the aughts and early teens was, you got to give up your brand. You're no longer in control. You're employed by the brand, but all you're doing is holding on tight while consumers and influencers and mavens take your brand somewhere else. And so forget having like creative concepts. The consumer will tell us what your brand is. And you just said, yeah, but no. Right? Like there's still a role for the creative guy here, right? There's still work to be done. We're not going to toss this thing completely overboard. And, to this day, I feel like brand managers have gotten home with the idea that we need to be listening. There's nobody better to listen to than influencers, and especially influencers that are potentially in my audience as identified by CIPIO. But is that flywheel really flying? Are we really spinning the wheel and coming up with creative ideas together with the influencers? And I would agree with you that when you get that right, that's magical, but it's hard to do. And again, it comes back to this idea that a SaaS solution probably isn't going to solve that, at least not today. We're going to need some better AI and some better robots before we're going to be coming up with great creative, concepts to tie together. So that's what you're bringing to the world. One of the things I'm curious, having now, done a few of these, I'm only a few hundred podcast episodes behind you. I learned so much in these episodes. And so what underlies this next question is, what have you learned from being a podcaster? And I'm especially thinking about, like, where has your professional art gotten better as you listen to the input of, oh God, like 10 of my guests have talked about, like, this is really important. I'm not so sure I'm great at that, or even just brilliant things that were said. Like, what have you learned from being a podcaster about the industry?
Man, this could be an entire another episode, I think.
Okay.
I've talked to a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of people from a lot of different perspectives, because Winfluence is not a podcast that's about the creator. Although I talk to creators, it's not about the software providers and the vendors, but I talk to them. It's not about the agencies, but I talk to them. It's not about the brands, but I talk to them. I also talk to academicians. So I kind of look at influence from a very broad perspective. What that means is I'm getting way smarter than most people every conversation I have about the industry, because I'm seeing it from a bunch of different angles, right? When I talk to you, I learned a lot more about sort of the evolution of sort of video influence and video marketing, and how you guys attacked the whole word of mouth influencer marketing world from your perspective, which was not a perspective I had really heard or thought much about at that point. And so I constantly get a little bit more breadth of knowledge, which just makes me more informed to have more conversations, which makes me a better podcaster, which makes me devise better questions, et cetera. So every step of the way is improving my game and getting smarter about the industry. And then I can take that knowledge to CIPIO, right? And say, hey, I've got this broad perspective on our industry. Let's take advantage of that. And one of the reasons that, Sandeep Samgavi, our CEO, and Gross and Edwards, our president and COO, one of the reasons they hired me, and one of the first things they did was, we want you to really do a thorough audit of what we're doing and how we're approaching things, and tell us what we're doing wrong, what we should change, what we should do differently. Not that I'm necessarily in charge, but I have that broad perspective on the industry that I can bring to a group of engineers that doesn't have, the marketing side of it, a group of marketers and communicators that doesn't have the SaaS or the engineering side. Not that I'm an engineer, but I talk to them about how they're building these technologies. And so I just bring a much more, maybe generalist is not the right word, but it's just a much more, sort of a little bit informed about a lot of things, as opposed to being a lot informed about one thing. I bring that broad perspective to the table, and CIPIO can take advantage of that. Our clients can take advantage of that. One of the things that I'm able to offer up to anybody who's a CIPIO client is, here's my phone number. Like, you're a client, you're a customer, call me if you need it, and we can bounce ideas off of each other. We offer strategic services. That whole, sort of creative concepting, I still do that for our clients as an additional service to their software or their managed services. So it just makes me better and more prepared to tackle those pain points and those problems that customers and clients have. So I get better as an interviewer. I get better as a podcaster, broadcaster. I get better as a professional. I make a lot more friends, and I'm a social butterfly. I like to connect with people. So when I walk in the door at the Influencer Marketing Show in New York next month in June, I'm going to walk in the door, and half the people there are going to know who I am, right? I don't necessarily have a great, name, face memory mechanism. So I sometimes fumble around until I figure out who they are, but I'm going to be able to get to the conversation faster. I'm going to be able to have more broad conversations with everybody in the room. And there's the ice has been broken. They know who I am because they either watch or listen to the show. So it's just an advantage, a big advantage for me in just being a professional in the industry. And I wouldn't quit Winfluence, for my life, because it really is the life force behind what I do.
I know you love all your clients, past and present. That's come through today. But I want to talk about, and this is, I'm not going to break into song, but the one that got away, right? Tell us about that great, true love of a client that, for whatever reason, somebody switched jobs, there was budget cuts. They just got away. So tell us the story of the good times, why it was such a great client and a good relationship. And, and if you want to talk about the denouement, we can, but we can even skip that part. We're going to shout them out on LinkedIn and we're going to bring them back to you once and for all.
Oh goodness, man. There's a couple of good ones that got away over the years. And unfortunately, the main one that I thought of as you were asking that question, it only got away because I took a different professional direction. It wasn't that the client left or fired the agency or whatever, or fired me. It was that I was like, okay, I've gotten to this point, but I really want to go do these other things. And in this role, I can't. So one of my first jobs in the agency world, in the mid 2000s, when I first started to talk about social media and establish who I was and become someone that people were paying attention to, I worked at an agency in Louisville, Kentucky called Doe Anderson. They're one of the oldest ad agencies in the country. They're absolutely fantastic. And I loved working there. I learned a ton from them, but I had gotten to a point where a combination of things were happening. I was being invited to speak at conferences. I was actually being invited to co-author a book with an author that ended up not working out, but like my personal brand was kind of taken off. And that was at a point in time when agencies and brands, businesses weren't real excited or comfortable about personal brands being on their rosters. Not that Doe and the folks at Doe Anderson encouraged me and nurtured me and gave me that space, but there was some tension there. And one of our clients that we were working with, who I absolutely love to this day, absolutely loved them as a client and wish that I could work with them every day now, was Maker's Mark Bourbon. And it's not just the story of the brand. It's not just that it is a good bourbon and a good brand, but because I was working with them day in, day out for a couple of years, I got to know the master distiller. I got to know Mr. Samuels, Bill Samuels Jr., whose father created the brand, and he was the CEO for many, many years. And just everything about that brand, everything about the family, everything about the bourbon, everything about the distillery, everything was fantastic. I just first class, loved working with them. And I was at a professional, point in time where I could stay at this agency and maybe have to, pour a little cold water on my ego and stay at this agency, or I could go try to blow up and be Jason Falls and build Social Media Explorer was my company and my blog at the time. And I chose the path that I chose, which took me away from Doe and took me away from Maker's Mark. Loved working with them. Still absolutely love the brand. Still love Doe Anderson. And love the work that they do. They're fantastic. And if I wouldn't say that I regret leaving because so many great things happened afterwards, but that's one point in time that if I could go back and maybe give it a little bit more thought, I may have made a different decision.
That is such a great story. And I can absolutely imagine Maker's Mark being one of these brands that you pinch yourself, that you're like, I can't believe I get to work on this brand every day. This is so much fun. This is so great. By the way, it was also my dad was a food scientist, and so never had them as a client, but he also loved Maker's Mark. He would go down there and he would tour the distillery and I never went on one of the tours with him, but I would hear stories about him asking questions that were way beyond the tour guide's capability to answer. But he was so into it that he wasn't even self-aware that everyone else on the tour is like, what is this guy talking about? Can we just get to the tasting room? So that's a great one. All right. Well, we're going to see if we can't get Maker's Mark to come back to you at Scipio. That's a great story. By the way, I just got an email from Mead. They wanted me to let you know that there is no such thing as a generic envelope. And so they're also going to be reaching out to you to correct those misconceptions. All right. Well, let's wrap this up with one more kind of down this path, because we would be remiss if we didn't talk about podcasting itself, which you've touched on a number of times, and kind of made me think this would be a good way for us to close it out. What is your advice for anybody thinking about starting a podcast? Personally, I'd say don't do it. The space is way too crowded now. There's just not enough room. But I have a feeling you're a more generous human being than I am, and you might say something slightly different. So I will turn it over to you too.
So the first piece of advice is absolutely in counter to Bill. Do it. Do it. Even if you just record a little snippet into your phone every other day and save it, maybe I'll publish it later. Do it. Because the more you do it, and this is the same for writing or producing, Instagram videos or whatever, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And at some point you're going to look at what you're doing and go, it's pretty good. Like, I should put this out into the world. Right. So practice makes perfect. Keep doing it. Do it. Even if you're the only audience, just do it. If it makes you happy, if it fulfills you, if it's something you're really excited and interested in, just do it, man. Even if it's just your own therapy, just do it. So that's piece number one. Piece number two, when you are ready to, or when you want to take this podcast out into the world, give some real, do what every brand should do, because your podcast is a brand. What you're creating is a brand, right? And it's an experience for the audience. Do what everyone should do in that situation. Sit down and think about, who am I talking to? What am I saying to them? Why am I saying it? And what do I want them to do with it? Because if you can define a strategic purpose and workflow and content path and storyline for your show, that you're reinforcing this point, your perspective on the world, or, the goal you're trying to get to with the world through talking about these things. If you know that and have that as your guide, then picking the guests, picking the topics, writing the topics, saying what you want to say becomes a lot easier for you to output, and is much more effective on the audience. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do. So go through that branding exercise. Who's my audience? What am I saying to them? What do I want them to do with it? Right. And what's the ultimate thing you're trying to change in the world with that? A lot of podcasts are, hey, we love marketing, or we love comedy, or we love whatever, so let's turn on the microphone and sit and just chit chat about that. Boring as hell. I love stand-up comedy more than I love most things. You can't hold a gun to my head to make me listen to most comedy podcasts, because it's two or three comedians who just sit around and try to make each other laugh. There's no point to the show. There needs to be a point. Like, hook me in on what we're going to talk about and why we're going to talk about it. Now you've got me. Yeah. So put yourself through that exercise, and what you put out into the world will be a lot more effective than it would otherwise.
That is great advice. And what occurred to me as you went through that advice is, if you're gonna create a podcast, absolutely follow Jason's guidance. But you know what? For everybody else, that's great advice to apply to your day-to-day life, to your job. Like, what am I trying to get done today? Yep. And stop viewing it, as you describe some influencer marketing, as a checklist and as an outcome that you are trying to get to, and you will make very different decisions about how you spend your time. So what a great way to wrap up. Jason, thank you so much for being willing to come on our little show and help us get great and follow in your footsteps. It was awesome to have you. Wish you the best of luck. And I know we'll stay in touch, but rooting for you and CIPIO as we go. And everyone else, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for tuning in. New episodes of Generation Influence drop every Wednesday, so be sure to check us out and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. You can find information on next week's guest in the description below. Hope to see you then and there.